let's start off the countdown with finding Lee. On Friday, July 9th, 2004, 21-year-old Lee Matthews was abducted from the parking lot of her university. The day before, she was out celebrating her birthday with her friends. Little did she know that that would be the last birthday she would ever celebrate. Shortly after her kidnapping, her father received a phone call from an unknown man. He said he demanded ransom in return for the safety of their daughter. Should they not comply, they were going to kill Lee. The father ended up giving the kidnapper what he wanted, but days went by and they still didn't hear from their daughter. Sadly, the Matthews family didn't get the happy ending they hoped for. A couple days later, Lee's body was found in a field. Now, this case isn't so straightforward. They did catch Lee's killer and he pled guilty, but there's a lot they still don't know, which they go into depth on in the documentary. For starters, a lot of the information the killer said in his testimony didn't add up. He said he killed Lee in the field and then left her there and burned her clothes. Well, one, there wasn't enough blood found at the crime scene for that to be the spot where she died. And two, they analyzed the bugs around and in her, and it showed them that her body was new to the area, so she had been placed there after she was already dead. So now they wonder, where was she taken before the field? Did the killer act alone or was there an accomplice? And lastly, why did he target Lee and kill her? The documentary aims to answer all this and more, so I highly recommend you all check it out. Remember, click the link in our description. In our 9th spot today we have Barbara Follett. On December 7, 1939, author Barbara Follett got in an argument with her husband and left the house. She disappeared without a trace and hasn't been seen or heard from since. The body has never been found. So according to her husband, she left with only $30 in her pocket. Nowadays, that would have been worth around $589. Now, her husband, Nickerson Rogers, waited 2 weeks before calling the police, which is suspicious on its own. Why did he wait so long? Although a number of people suspect Rogers, there was no evidence suggesting foul play. Also, the media wasn't alerted about her disappearance until 1966. That's because the missing persons report was filed under the name Rogers and not Barbara's last name, so no one knew that the famous writer went missing. Now, was this done on purpose by her husband so that people didn't know she was gone? I don't know, it's all very suspicious, and it's hard to believe she could leave with anyone having any sightings of her. Moving on, at number 8 we have Paula Jean Weldon. Paula Jean Weldon disappeared on December 1st, 1946. That day she told her roommate she was going out for a walk, but Paula never returned home that night. Now, during her walk, she was spotted by a number of other students. In fact, one of her friends picked her up at around 2:45 and drove her close to his house. And then around 4 p.m., another group of school friends saw her about to climb a trail. But around that time, it was getting darker out and colder, and she wasn't dressed appropriately. Authorities were alerted when Paula didn't show up to class the following day. To this day, we don't know what happened to her. Did she fall off the trail and hurt herself? Was she kidnapped on her way back to the dorm? No one knows. What is strange though is that a couple of years later, a local man was caught bragging to his friends saying he knew where Paula's body was, but he could never lead the police to the gravesite. So we don't know what to think of that. And to this day, no body or personal belongings have been found. Moving on, at number 7 we have Walter Collins. Now, when I first heard about this story, it creeped me the hell out, so just prepare yourself. In the 1920s, a young mother reported her son, Walter Collins, missing. 5 months later, police brought Walter back home. Except it wasn't her son. But the police were like, no ma'am, this is your son, just take the boy. In fact, they went as far as to call her a terrible mother for not recognizing her own son and then placed her in a mental hospital. The real Walter Collins has never been found. It's thought that maybe he was the victim of the serial killer Gordon Stewart Northcott, but we still don't know for sure. To this day, the case of Walter Collins still remains a huge mystery. Another big part of this mystery, why were the police so adamant that imposter Walter was her real son? Seriously. In our 6th spot today we have Patty Blow, Renee Bruhl, and Ann Miller. On July 2nd, 1966, 3 young women, Patty, Renee, and Ann, all hopped on a motorboat at a Lake Michigan beach. They were last seen in their bathing suits headed off on this boat. They never returned home. And of course, there's a number of theories as to what happened to them. The most famous one is that the girls were on their way to a floating abortion clinic, but during the procedure something went wrong and one of the girls sadly passed away. The clinic was then like, oh snap, we can't have 2 witnesses, so they just killed the other girls and dumped them into the water. I mean, That's extremely messed up, and obviously it's just a theory. We still don't know what truly happened to them. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Paul Jepson. Now this next case happened in the same area as Paula went missing in, you know, the girl that I talked about before? Yeah. In fact, the area has been given the name the Bennington Triangle because it's the area in which a number of hikers and residents go missing without a trace. It's like the Bermuda Triangle. Not only that, but a number of UFO sightings have been reported in this area. So, is it all correlated? Maybe aliens are abducting people there. Anyways, Paul Jepson was another victim of the Bennington Triangle. In October of 1950, Paul Jepson was out on his farm with his family. That's when his mom told him to go back into the truck while she finishes up her farm duties. When she returned to the truck, her son was nowhere to be found. Now, police did bring in bloodhounds to track his scent. And guess what? They tracked his scent up until Glastonbury Mountains, which is eerily close to where Paula was last seen. Coincidence? I think not. That's hella suspicious, I'm just saying. In our 4th spot today we have Mary Badaraco. In 1984, Mary Badaraco disappeared from her home. Her car was left in her driveway, but the side mirror was smashed in. On top of that, her wedding ring and car keys were left on the kitchen counter, but Mary was nowhere to be found. Now, according to her husband, Amy took off with $100,000 in exchange for their home. The two have been planning to get divorced, but no evidence of her taking that amount of money was ever found. On top of that, her husband never reported her missing, just insisted that Mary had left everything behind and wanted to start a new life. But her daughters were like, hell no, that's not our mom at all. After diving deeper into the case, it was discovered that Mary's husband was incredibly toxic. The two would often get in fights and he would hit her. So the police classified the case as a homicide, but the murderer has never been caught, and they don't have enough evidence to pin it on the husband. Another thing that doesn't make sense, sometime after Mary disappeared, her car did too, and later the police received a tip that the husband buried the car somewhere. I just wish that we had answers, like where did Mary go? Is she safe and living a new life somewhere, or was she killed by her husband during a heated argument? In our 3rd spot today we have Jessica Gutierrez. On June 6, 1986, Jessica Gutierrez was taken from her bed in her home during the middle of the night and was never seen again. The next morning her mom entered her room and found the curtains were ripped off the window and the front door was open. So it's believed that the kidnapper or kidnappers entered the house through the window and left through the front door. The creepiest part? Her sister was in the room with her when it happened. She claimed that Jessica was taken by a man with the magic hat and the beard. That's all we know about this case. Jessica's family believes that she was abducted by a close friend or someone that she knew. It's just a very sad and mysterious case. In our 2nd spot today we have Rico Harris. Rico Harris was a well-known basketball player for the Harlem Globetrotters. Now, a lot happened over the years, and in 2014 he was fired and then decided to live in Seattle with his long-distance girlfriend that lived there. He was in LA visiting his mom, but his plan was to then drive from LA to Seattle. Sadly, he never would make it. His car was found abandoned at the side of the road in Sacramento. The car was out of gas and had a nearly dead battery. In his car was his backpack and a phone with a video of him from that night. Harris was nowhere to be found. Now, days after his disappearance, people did see that they saw a giant person walking along State Route 16, which could have been Harris since he was 6'9". So it could be that his car broke down during the drive and he left on foot to go try and find help. But we don't know for sure. And in our number 1 spot today we have Madison Scott. This case has always given me the creeps, it just doesn't sit well with me. On May 28, 2011, 20-year-old Madison Scott disappeared from the Hogsback Lake campsite in British Columbia. There was a birthday party being held at the lake that night and people were going to camp out there, but they didn't follow through with the plan. Maddie, however, already set up her tent and was planning on staying the night there anyways. She was an experienced camper and loved camping. She had camped out in that area a number of times. However, she was last seen around 4 a.m. when the last group of people left. The next morning, people were cleaning up when they saw her tent beside her truck, but Maddie was nowhere to be found. Police had dragged the bottom of the lake and aerial searches were conducted, but nothing ever turned up. Police even did polygraph tests on the partygoers, but it led to no possible suspects. Police think that Maddie left the campsite in someone's vehicle, but besides that, no one really knows what happened to her.
Coming in at our number 10 spot, Funai Agent. Located in the Amazonian jungle, the Kariwa tribe is estimated to have a population of roughly 150 people and are definitely not a tribe to visit. While there have been previous successful attempts at making contact with the Caribou people, on August 2nd, 1997, a member of Brazil's FUNAI agency, which is a government group dedicated to the protection of isolated communities, attempted to make contact with the group, trying to establish peaceful relations with the community. But this man would not make it out alive. In fact, in over a decade, the FUNAI lost 7 of its men in an attempt to make contact with the Caribou people, and finally decided they would no longer try. The government still provides them with modern immunizations and established their community as a national park in order to halt logging. Not much else is known of the isolated group, as the government will not let any anthropologists visit in fear they may not return. Next up at number 9, Benedict Allen. While on his second trip to visit the Yafo people, a remote Papua New Guinea tribe with little to no contact with the outside world, after being dropped off by a helicopter to the remote land, he trekked for 3 weeks into the forest, hoping to track down the people who he had met years prior in 1988. He did actually eventually find the community once again, but not long after suddenly seemed to have disappeared. And the media outlets had no clue where Allen was, or even if he was still alive. Famously, he said to not come looking for him if he was thought to be missing, though this request was not followed by the media. Now, I will level with you, he was actually eventually found. But he wasn't happy with the outcome, as he insisted he was not lost and did not want to be saved. But ill with malaria, he accepted the help and was flown out to a hospital. Coming in at number 8, 1950s Mennonites. Located in Bolivia and the Paraguay, the Oreo people are a very isolated group. About 5,000 members remain in the community, and while their current threat is deforestation, you also don't want to take your chances visiting this community. Their first known contact with outsiders was way back in the 40s and 50s, when a large group of Mennonite farmers forcibly took their land to raise pigs. Well, as you can imagine, this did not go over well, and many were killed by the Oreo people. Later again, in 1986, a group of missionaries attempting to evangelize the community was not well appreciated, and 5 men did not make it out alive. Long story short, just leave them alone and they'll leave you alone. Next up at number 7, Don Phillips and Bruno Pereira. In an attempt to write a novel on how to help save the Amazonian rainforest, journalist Don Phillips and an indigenous rights activist, Bruno Pereira, headed into the lawless jungle and never returned. After being reported missing for a few weeks, remains of the 2 men were actually found, but who or what killed them in the depths of the jungle is unknown. Some believe it could have been a tribe defending their land, while others have theorized it could have been other intruders, as the 2 men were writing a novel revealing the dark underbelly of the area. Whatever it was, I think it's safe to say it's best to keep out of the isolated communities, or you run the risk of never being seen again. Next up at number 6, Nicolas Flores. Largely gathered in Peru, the Mashapiro tribe is estimated to have between 100 and 250 members, and they are considered extremely dangerous to any outsider. In 2012, in fact, archaeologist Diego Cortillo visited the isolated community in an attempt to learn and get pictures of the Mashapiro people, which he did, and they were released later in a Survival International. However, it was his local guide, Nicolas Flores, who was found dead 6 days later with bamboo-tipped arrow struck through his heart. Most likely meant as a sign to ward off further intruders, as the clan likely fears being killed by disease or having their communities taken over by outsiders, as has been attempted in the past. Either way, best to just steer clear. Next up at number 5, Riel Franciscado. Now, not too long ago, in June of 2020, a longtime member of FUNAI and an expert of the Amazonian attempted to make contact with the Uru-i-Wau-Wau territory in Rondonia. His life mission was to protect these people, and though he was known to make successful and peaceful attempts with other communities in the past, this time he would not be so lucky. Likely thought to be an attacker by the local tribe, as is often the case in their experience with many poachers and illegal loggers known to frequent the area. Franciscato was shot through the heart with a bow and arrow and left for dead. A witness claims that Riel cried out and actually pulled the arrow from his chest and began to run away, but not long after collapsed. It seems like no matter what your motives might be, that these people do not want you there, so let's just all agree to stop trying. Next up, at number 4, Alejandro Lavaca and Inez Arango. Located in Ecuador, the Tagari people live a hunting and foraging lifestyle and have long resisted outsiders in their community. Most notably, back in 1987, when a bishop, Alejandro Lavaca, and his sister, Inez Arango, decided to travel to the area in hopes to preach Christianity to the locals. They were dropped off by helicopter and planned to be picked up a few days later, but as I'm sure you've guessed, this would not be the case. A few days went by and the helicopter pilot came back to retrieve the bishop and his sister, only to find them brutally killed, their corpses laid out as a warning sign to intruders. Do not come back. This would not stop people, however, as recently as 2008, a man was found in the area with 9 iron-headed spears jutting out of his stomach. Coming in at number 3, John Allen Cho. Likely the most well-known of the isolated clans, the Sentinelese people live on a wooden island in the Indian Ocean and are fierce protectors of their home. The community made headlines when, in 2018, even though it was and still is illegal to visit this tribe, an American missionary named John Allen Cho ignored all laws and decided he would still visit the indigenous people to spread the word of God. He managed to bribe several fishermen in order to reach the island, and as was completely expected, the Sentinelli assassinated him not too long after his arrival, likely with bows and arrows. All the fishermen that helped Cho in his mission were arrested, and the island remains illegal to all visitors. Next up at number 2, we have Helena Valero. Okay, so this one is kind of cheating because she did in fact return, but this story is so crazy I had to include it on the list. Back in the 1930s, a young girl named Helena Valero was kidnapped at just 13 years old when her family was attacked by a nearby tribe. Helena lived near the Amazon forest with her farmer parents, but once captured was taken to live with a tribe known as Shemateri. Helena accidentally gave poisonous toad eggs to one of the other children, and that child's father found out and threatened to kill her, so she ran away deeper into the forest where she lived for 7 months. Eventually, she ended up reaching a new tribe called the Namote, but was not welcome at first, so once again she fled back into the woods believing they were going to kill her. But things took a turn when later she was caught by the head man of the tribe and ended up actually falling in love with and marrying him, becoming his 3rd wife. Years went by and Helena had 2 children with the chief, but sadly, he was killed by an opposing tribe. This threatened Helena and the life of her children. Scared for her and her children's life, she fled with them to another nearby tribe, uninvolved with the feud, and eventually married again. Unlike her previous marriage, however, her second husband was not kind to her, but still she gave him 2 more children. Her life takes a turn when the tribe that killed her first husband relocated near her once again, and Helena, fearing for her life and terribly unhappy in her marriage, escaped to live among white men again. But rather shockingly, upon her return to her previous home, she was rejected by her family and living in poverty and not well taken care of at all. Helena eventually decided life was better among the Yanomami people and returned to live out the remainder of her life there. Coming in our number 1 spot is Michael Rockefeller. Located in South Papua, Indonesia, the Otsjanup village belongs to the Asmat people, and unlike some of the others on this list, they're not actually widely known as being specifically violent or dangerous. In fact, in modern times, while still very isolated, they've been known to seek out higher education and incorporate modern technologies into the village. But in November of 1961, one man would not be so lucky. Michael Rockefeller, the son of famous and incredibly wealthy New York governor, disappeared on an expedition to visit the Asmat people. He was apparently on the trip as he was looking to curate a collection of the local art from the isolated group to bring back to his family's museum in New York. But he would never make it back. Rockefeller was last seen swimming to the shore when his boat overturned, and for years, no one really knew what happened to him. But recently, author Carl Hoffman decided to dive into the tale and see what he could find. He revisited the exact location where Michael traveled all those years ago, and according to the locals he spoke with, they said, quote, "On shore, he saw familiar faces, those of the Otsjanup warriors. Instead of the rescue Rockefeller hoped for, he was stabbed in the ribs by one of the men, fatally killed in the precise actions of ritualistic headhunting and consumed by the warriors."
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Tat Tak School. This school has remained abandoned since 1988, and for fair reason. The city in which the school resides has a dark history that is said to include a few World War era massacres and all of the atrocities involving that sort of thing. It is said that the remains from some of these horrible acts were buried in the hill next to the school. Shortly before the school closed in 1988, the headmistress took her own life in one of the bathrooms while wearing a red dress, supposedly leaving behind a spirit that appears to people dressed in red. The creepiest story relating to this haunting happened in 2011 when students were exploring the abandoned school. While here, one of the students saw the lady in red, which led to them all running for the hills, but as they began to run away, one of the students began showing strange, violent behavior that had never been seen before. An ambulance ended up being called because of the entire ordeal. This is all to say that this school appears as just a broken down, forgotten about place, but there's clearly something more sinister here. In our number 9 spot today, we have 31 Granville Road. If you're a person who is interested in true crime, you might be familiar with this place already because it is the site of the infamous and horrifying Hello Kitty killing. Back in 1999, a 23-year-old woman named Fan Man Yi was working as a host at a nightclub and needed money to help support herself and her young son when she made the decision to steal the wallet of one of the clients of her workplace. She was caught for the stealing, and while she returned the money, the man demanded that she also pay him a steep fine in return for the action. She said she just needed some time to gather the cost he was asking for, but unfortunately just a few days later, this man, with the help of some accomplices, would kidnap Fan and keep her locked up for a month. She sadly suffered incredibly horrific things and later succumbed to her injuries and passed away. The address of where this all took place was an apartment building at 31 Granville Road. In 2012, the apartment was demolished, and in 2016, a new hotel was built on the site, but even still, people have reported being haunted by the ghost of this young woman. Whether haunted or not, hearing the details of this story, it totally makes sense why people would get an eerie feeling just being around that area at all. In our number 8 spot today, we have Dragon Lodge. Dragon Lodge sits on the Peak, which is one of the most expensive areas in Hong Kong for real estate, and while that means that it comes with a heavy price tag, it is also rich with terrifying tales. Dragon Lodge is said to have had many owners throughout the years, the first of which being the man who built it, but in 1920 he went bankrupt and was forced to sell it. During World War II, the lodge was occupied by Japanese soldiers, some of which are said to have taken the lives of Catholic nuns in the front courtyard. By the time the 1980s rolled around, Dragon Lodge was already referred to as one of Hong Kong's most haunted places, but despite the rumblings, the property was purchased again and there were plans for some retail development. These plans fell through, however, because when construction workers began to do some work, they too became convinced of its paranormal nature. The workers continually reported the sounds of a crying child coming from the mansion and refused to continue to work on it. Since then, the mansion has remained completely untouched. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Saiyangpan Community Complex. This complex was first built in 1892, but its original purpose was to house medical staff. This was until the Second World War took place, and during this time it is said to have turned into quite a gruesome execution ground, and after this, the site later became a psychiatric hospital. And after it was abandoned, it was badly damaged when trespassers set fires in it, really just setting the stage for an exceptionally eerie location. In 1998, the building was given a new life once again, and it was turned into a community complex, but now there are plenty of strange reports coming from the building. While they preserved the granite exterior, inside people have reported hearing the sounds of a woman crying, mysterious footsteps. There have been alleged sightings of a devil-like man wearing traditional clothing roaming around the halls. There's said to be a ghost that bursts into flames. This is all to say that there are plenty of ghosts here. While they are trying to do their best to rebrand this haunted location, the nickname High Street Haunted House hasn't quite escaped it yet. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Louis Sang Chung. Back in 2012, this location was turned into a Chinese medicine and healthcare center for Baptist University, but prior to that, it sat empty for decades due to the haunting tales that come from within. It is said that there were plans to remodel the building a while ago, back in the 80s, but those working on the building, construction and cleaning crew alike, began to fall ill one by one. At first I thought that there were probably just some toxic chemicals in the building or something like that, but it wasn't the same illness. Things were different, and sometimes it was an illness, it was a fatal accident. Things were also disappearing, and this all led to the work on the building being stopped. Some of the workers even reported seeing figures, like a group of children playing soccer, but instead of a ball, it was a head. Sometimes at night, the upper level floors would light up on their own and shadowy figures could be seen roaming around the hallways. In our number 5 spot today, we have Bride's Pool. While Bride's Pool is gorgeous, it's a rock pool with waterfalls surrounding it. It gets its name and haunting story from a tragic accident. Legend goes that 4 men were carrying a bride-to-be to her groom's village on a chair, and to get to the village they needed to pass over the pool. As they pass over one of the waterfalls, one of the men slipped on a rock and all of them fell below into the pool, sadly passing away in the tragic accident. Now the bride, having never made it to her groom, awaits at the bottom of the pool, waiting for her groom to return. There have also been reports of people taking their lives here, and in 1982, at one point, there were even human remains discovered that turned out to belong to a man who was killed by his fiancée. The horrible stories clearly just don't end, and they even extend up to the road that sits above the pool, which now has the nickname of the Deadly Curve, based on the high number of accidents that resulted into fatalities. Maybe it's just the bad luck of the pool. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Murray House. This is another one of these spots that now has a life far past its haunting history. The Murray House is now the home to restaurants that sit on the waterfront and places to shop, but it once was the officers' quarters of the Murray Barracks in 1846. Flash forward a bit to the Japanese occupation, and this building was seeing horrifying crimes carried out against the citizens of Hong Kong. From here, stories of ghosts and hauntings at the site became so bad that the government actually ordered for there to be 2 exorcisms there, one in 1963 and one in 1974, and they were aimed at freeing these souls who were clearly stuck here. Eventually the building was dismantled and all of the items in the house were moved into storage for a while before, in 2000, it was decided to move and rebuild the structure to Stanley, where it still stands now. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Namku Terrace. This location was first built in 1915 by a wealthy family who was involved in the silk trade. The same family lived here until World War II, when they were forced to flee the city. Once abandoned by the family, soldiers began to seize property in the area to hold people and items, and this specific location was used to house women who were being held by the soldiers. These soldiers did horrific things to these women, some leading to the women passing away, and since these incredibly atrocious acts, the terrace has constantly had stories coming from it that tell the tales of ghosts wandering the house. Some passerbys even hear screaming coming from the home, home and see strange shadows in the windows. Back in 2003, a group of students decided to try and camp out for a night in the haunted house in the hopes of seeing a ghost, but in the end they got a lot more than they bargained for. Police ended up being called when one of the students claimed to be possessed by a spirit and ended up needing to be hospitalized. In the end, the home sat completely vacant for 18 years until recently, when the current owners expressed their plans to restore the building. In our number 2 spot today, we have Solo Pun. This abandoned village has a name that means locked compass, and this name comes from the reports that compasses very creepily seem to stop working nearby and in this village. The exact reason for the abandonment of this village is unknown. There are plenty of stories, however. Some believe that everyone went missing overnight, others believe that the villagers died on the way to a wedding in a boating accident and the survivors couldn't stand to remain in the village. Whatever the reason, the village appears as if one day everybody just up and left, never to be seen again. This is why this spot is now a heavily visited area. It definitely gives that eerie, uneasy feeling when you're around it. If you were to take a trip there, the closest road is about 3 hours away, however, so you'll find yourself hiking for quite a good chunk of that trip. In our number 1 spot today, we have the White House Compound. Also known as the Victoria Road Detention Center, this place is familiar to many as it was used as a place to hold political prisoners and those suspected of spying during the 1967 riots. This means that it was also a place where many people were treated horribly, harmed, and executed. Prisoners were held in tiny cells under horrible conditions, and some even were held in solitary confinement for months on end. After the end of the riots, the place was abandoned, and it was forgotten about by many, except for those who knew what kind of horrors happened inside. From the time it was abandoned up until quite recently, this place was unmarked. There weren't signs, and it wasn't even placed on maps. That was until 2018, when it was converted into an overseas campus for the University of Chicago Booth School of Business as a way to redevelop the site and hopefully give it a much brighter future.
And we're starting off with West Castleton. I have always wanted to go to a ghost town. I think it would be like really eerie, fun at the same time, and the town of West Castleton on Lake Bomoseen has long been abandoned. What once used to be a busy, bustling industrial town has been empty since the 1930s, and there are many who claim that the area is teeming with ghostly apparitions. There is one tale about 2 men who once took their boat out to visit a tavern in town but were never seen from again. The only remnants of the men was their empty rowboat found floating alone in Lake Bomoseen the following day. Some say that on some nights when the moon is full, to have seen an empty, semi-translucent rowboat silently making its way across the water towards the abandoned town on the other side of the lake. If you're liking the channel, guys, don't forget to comment and subscribe. It really helps us out more than you probably know. Alright, on to number 9. At number 9, we have Montpelier Cemetery, more specifically the Black Agnes statue, sitting atop the grave of John Hubbard, a notorious crook in the late 1800s who swindled his way into gaining his aunt's inheritance, which was meant to go to the city. He received his aunt's estate to the frustration of the city leaders, but died of liver cancer just a few years later. This statue is pretty famous for being one of the most haunted items in the state of Vermont. And just looking at it doesn't really surprise me much. I don't really believe in curses myself. I've never been cursed, at least that I know of, and I've never successfully cursed anyone else, though I have tried on a number of occasions. But looking at a statue like this, I could see why people would feel a little uneasy around it, especially upon learning that the statue is meant to be the personification of death itself, the Greek god Thanatos. It is said that if you sit on the statue's lap, you'll be met with misfortune, and if you dare sit upon it on a full moon at midnight, you will die within a week. Next on the list, we have the Brattleboro Retreat Tower. This beautiful Gothic tower sits on the grounds of Brattleboro Retreat, which is a mental health facility that still operates today, but was originally built as an asylum in 1834. This particular tower was constructed between 1887 and 1894 by patients of the asylum, with doctors believing they would benefit from physical labor, and the tower still remains, now standing abandoned. That tower has a bit of a dark history, though. There were said to be multiple cases of patients having taken their lives from the top of the tower, and in the 1920s and 30s, there were multiple things surrounding the tower that finally led to its entrance being boarded up in 1938. Those who visit the structure today claim to feel an eerie presence, even reporting having seen ghostly apparitions plummeting from the top. If I ever find myself in the area, I'd love to check it out. Aside from the ghost stuff, it'd just be really cool to hang out by this gothic tower in the middle of a forest. Glastonbury Mountain, located in Bennington County's Green Mountain National Forest, has been the breeding ground for all sorts of paranormal activity. If you decide to traverse the mountain, you just might happen across a Sasquatch or spot a UFO in the sky. There's even an Algonquin legend about a stone that devours people. And if all that isn't enough to pique your interest, the area is also said to be cursed. 5 hikers known to have gone missing in the area between 1945 to 1950. Only one body was ever found, and the cause of death was never determined. There have also been so many strange occurrences in the area. It's often referred to as the Bennington Triangle, like the Bermuda Triangle. See, you get it. Number 6, the Dutton House in Shelburne Museum. Shelburne Museum is a collection of various historical buildings, most of which have been moved to the property from other locations. And one of these structures is the Dutton House. The home was built by the Dutton family in Cavendish, Vermont in 1781. And 11 people are thought to have died in the home, and it was left abandoned for decades before being moved to the museum in 1950. Staff say they've seen some pretty strange things in there, like the sound of a little girl crying, which isn't a sight, that's something you hear, James. Anyway, but they've also seen ghostly faces in windows. Some visitors claim they've heard eerie whispers in the halls and felt an icy chill running down their spines. And there have been sightings of a transparent figure roaming the house at night. They say it's the ghost of the original owner who passed away. Some folks reckon he and his family are still lingering around. They're refusing to leave the home. Some staff are so creeped out by the place that they just refuse to go inside it entirely. Next, we have Green Mountain Inn. This inn is said to be haunted by one primary apparition, that being Boots Berry, located in Stowe. This beautiful inn, built back in 1833, pretty picturesque. Honestly, if I ever take a trip to Stowe, this is where I want to stay. But you may find yourself rooming with an extra guest. Boots Berry was said to have been born in the hotel, the son of 2 employees. As he grew up, he developed a drinking problem, though, and was eventually kicked out of the inn. Landed himself in a prison in New Orleans, but soon returned to Stowe, where he supposedly fell to his death off the roof of the Green Mountain Inn, where he apparently loved to tap dance. So some say on some nights they can hear the sounds of his tap dancing feet on the roof. Others claim to have actually seen a full-bodied apparition of Boots making his way down the corridors of the inn. Number 4, Norwich University. Some dark things are said to have happened in the walls of this prestigious institution, with its gorgeous campus nestled among the rolling hills, and has a reputation of being haunted. There's a boarded up dorm room where a long time ago 2 students were said to have taken their lives. Students and staff have reported hearing strange noises and voices emanating from the supposedly empty room. Then you have Chaplain Hall, the former library where books were said to fly and float off the shelves. Nowadays, residents report seeing strange figures roaming the hallway. You also have 2 other areas of the school that are supposedly plagued by paranormal activity: Ranson and Hawkins Hall. Many students have reported waking up unable to move or breathe, feeling like something is sitting on their chest. Sleep paralysis, it can be pretty unsettling, but I doubt there's anything paranormal going on there, especially for stressed out university students, but hey, I guess you never really truly know. Next up, we have Marble Inn, located in Fairhaven, Vermont. This inn is said to have a few different spirits that reside within the building. It was built in 1867, and one of the previous owners apparently passed away in the tea room, and apparently he was pretty upset about it too, because now he, as well as a couple other ghosts, supposedly haunt the place. Many guests have reported waking up to see the figure of a man in a gray suit standing at the foot of their bed. There was also an instance where a repairman was working on the basement and suddenly spotted a woman standing behind him, but she just remained silent before walking into another room. Repairman was obviously pretty confused, but he followed the woman into the room. When he entered it, there was nobody there. Classic ghost story, just an empty, dark room. I wonder what the rest of this workday was like after that. How do you just go back to what you were doing after experiencing something like that? Like, if I saw a ghost, that'd just change everything for me. Oh, ghosts, I guess they just exist now. That completely changes my entire outlook on life. What happens after death? What is reality? Am I just hallucinating things now? Am I someone who hallucinates? What is going on? Anyway, these pipes, they're not gonna fix themselves. Back to work. Number 2, the Bowman House, aka Laurel Hall, regarded as one of the most haunted places in Vermont. The first owner of the home, John Bowman, is buried in a mausoleum on the property along with the rest of his family, each of whom died tragically. Locals swear they've seen shadowy figures moving about the rooms and strange noises echo through the halls at night. Some say they hear the disembodied cry of a baby, which would really freak and irk me out, quite frankly. I can't stand babies crying in public as it is. They seem to show up everywhere I go for some reason. So last thing I need in my life is a wailing ghost baby now. Some people who visit the home even claim to have seen the ghostly figure of Mrs. Bowman standing at the top of the stairs. There are whispers of disembodied voices calling out in despair and ghostly stuff going on. Some folks claim they've even witnessed objects moving on their own. Basically, some people think it's haunted is what I'm getting at here. Number 1, we have Gold Brick Bridge, aka Emily's Bridge. Emily's Bridge in Vermont is infamous for its spooky reputation as a haunted hotspot. Not only is it said to be the most haunted place in the state of Vermont, but one of the most haunted bridges in the United States. This old covered bridge has a tale that'll send shivers down your spine. The story goes that Emily, a young lady head over heels in love, planned to elope with her sweetheart at the bridge, but for some reason, the guy just totally ditched her. Devastated and heartbroken, Emily decided to end her own life. Ever since that fateful day, folks claim to have experienced some pretty creepy stuff around Emily's Bridge. Ghostly sightings, weird noises, the feeling of being watched, and mysterious footsteps. Those are just the tip of the iceberg though. This lady gets physical. People find scratches on their cars. Some who dare to cross the bridge on foot have reported being grabbed or scratched themselves. And you know what?
Starting
I gotta
off
say,
this list in our
getting
number 10
grabbed and
spot, we have the
scratched by a
Gonjiam
feisty female
Psychiatric
ghost.
Hospital. This hospital
I
is
hate the sound of
widely
that.
regarded
I
as
have
one
to
of the
book my
most
ticket out there.
haunted places in the world. Abandoned in the 1990s, this hospital quickly became a popular destination for urban explorers and ghost hunters alike. Its eerie, decaying corridors and rusting medical equipment have been the subject of countless horror stories and urban legends over the years. It really is the perfect backdrop for a horrifying tale, but it's not just the dilapidated building that gives Gonjiam its reputation. The hospital has a dark history with reports of mistreatment of former patients, some so bad it even led to death. Some say that the souls of those who died within its walls still haunt the place to this day. In 2007, a horror movie called Gonjiam Haunted Asylum was released based on the legend of the hospital, and of course the movie only added to the site's notoriety, drawing more thrill seekers to its doors. Despite its haunting reputation, the hospital remains off limits to visitors, with authorities sealing off the area to prevent accidents and to preserve its historical significance. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Yongdeok House. The Yongdeok House, located in the countryside, has long been rumored to be haunted. The old house is said to have a dark history with tragic events that took place within its walls. Local legends claim that the house was once owned by a very wealthy family who met an untimely and extremely gruesome end. Some say that the family was cursed, while others believe that the house itself is cursed with a malevolent spirit that haunts its halls. Visitors to the house have reported hearing strange noises, seeing ghostly apparitions, and feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. Many have even claimed to have seen the ghostly figure of a woman dressed in traditional Korean clothing. Despite these spooky details, people from all over the world still try to visit the house to catch a glimpse of the paranormal activity it holds. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, there's no denying that this house is a place shrouded in mystery and intrigue. In our number 8 spot today, we have Yongma-land. Also known as Ghost Park, this place is a spine-chilling destination for the bravest of thrill seekers. This theme park was once a bustling amusement park with thrilling rides and attractions that brought joy to visitors of all ages. However, after a very tragic accident in 1999 that resulted in a horrible death, the park was abruptly closed and left to decay. Since its abandonment, visitors have reported eerie encounters and unexplained sightings throughout the park. Some claim to have seen ghostly apparitions wandering among the decaying rides, while others have heard haunting screams and disembodied laughter echoing through the halls. The park's rusty and broken down structures that are overgrown with vines and weeds only add to the really eerie atmosphere. Of course, while the park is closed, it doesn't mean people have left the park alone. Instead, people continue to try and enter the park in search of a haunting tale of their own. This is not for the faint of heart, however, as it is said that the ghostly inhabitants of the park still roam its grounds, waiting to scare and torment anyone who dares to enter. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Gyeonggi Line Forest Park. Located in Seoul, this park has gained notoriety as one of the most haunted places in the country. The park was built on the site of a former railway track, which was abandoned after a tragic accident in 1995. Since then, locals have reported strange occurrences, including ghostly apparitions, disembodied voices, and sudden drops in temperature, you know, just like the haunting staples. Legend has it that the spirits of those who lost their lives in the accident still roam the park, seeking vengeance for their untimely deaths. Visitors have reported feeling an overwhelming sense of unease and hearing eerie whispers in the darkness. Many refuse to enter the park at night, fearing they may encounter one of the vengeful ghosts. Rumor has it that there has even been attempts to exorcise the spirits out of the park, but still, the haunting persists. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Nulbom Garden Restaurant. This restaurant is a very beautiful but extremely eerie establishment, perfect if you're looking for a meal with a side of the ghostly. This restaurant has been known to locals for years as a popular spot for delicious Korean cuisine and breathtaking garden views, but there are some who claim that the restaurant is haunted by the ghosts of its past. Like any good haunting, this story starts off with a tragic accident that took place many years ago at the restaurant, which has apparently left behind a restless spirit. Some visitors have reported hearing strange noises, feeling sudden chills, and even seeing apparitions while dining at the restaurant. Despite the spooky rumors, many brave diners continue to visit the restaurant, hoping to catch a glimpse of the otherworldly activity. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, there's no denying that this restaurant has an undeniable aura of mystery and intrigue that draws in visitors from all over the world. So, if you're feeling adventurous and are in the mood for some delicious Korean food with a side of supernatural thrills, make sure you pay a visit to this haunted eatery, but don't say that I didn't warn you. In our number 5 spot today, we have Yeonpyeon Island. This island is a small, tranquil island located off of the western coast of South Korea. Beneath its serene exterior, however, lies a dark history of conflict and tragedy. The island was the site of a bloody naval battle between North and South Korea in 2002 and again in 2010, resulting in numerous casualties and extensive damage to the island's infrastructure. In the aftermath of the battles, many residents of the island reported very strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena, leading to rumors that the island is haunted by the ghosts of those who perished. Locals have reported hearing disembodied voices, seeing apparitions, and experiencing just, that uneasy feeling while on this island. Because of its strategic position, the island is still visited by people each year, and still the haunting stories continue. Whether the island is truly haunted or not, its very tumultuous past is a testament to the enduring legacy of war and the resilience of the human spirit. In our number 4 spot today, we have the DMZ. Despite what this name says and implies, the Korean Demilitarized Zone is perhaps one of the most militarized places in the entire world. This is the location that marks the separation between North and South Korea and was established to serve as a sort of buffer zone between the two countries. There are tons of military facilities in this zone, and only high-ranking officials are allowed in. This is exactly what led to the creation of the Civilian Control Line, which is a line that created an additional buffer zone to the demilitarized zone, which is meant to further restrict access to any civilians or unauthorized personnel. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Paldang House. This house has gained a reputation as one of the scariest and most haunted places in the country. Originally built in the 1920s, in its previous life, this house served as a school before it was abandoned in the 1980s. Since then, the building has been the site of numerous ghost sightings and paranormal activities. Apparently, when the house was still a school, it was led by a horrible horrible, very cruel headmaster who ended up dying under some exceptionally mysterious circumstances. Many believe that his vengeful spirit still haunts the halls of this house, along with the ghosts of former students who also perished there. Visitors to the house have reported hearing noises, feeling drops in the temperature, and some have even seen apparitions. Some have claimed to have been pushed or touched by invisible hands, while others have just felt that overwhelming sense of dread and also a sense of fear. Despite this terrifying reputation, this house continues to draw brave souls who seek a thrill and glimpse into the world of the supernatural. In our number 2 spot today, we have the abandoned cobalt mine. The Gyeongsan abandoned cobalt mine is a place shrouded in mystery and eerie tales. This mine was once a thriving hub of activity, with miners working tirelessly to extract cobalt from deep within the earth. However, the mine was eventually closed due to safety concerns, and now it has become a place for lovers of all things paranormal. According to local legends, the mine is haunted by the ghosts of the miners who lost their lives within its dark tunnels. Visitors have reported feeling a chilling presence and hearing unexplained noises while exploring the abandoned site. Many have even claimed to have seen apparitions of deceased miners. Despite its spooky reputation, this mine remains a very popular attraction for those who, want that adrenaline rush. However, visitors are advised to exercise caution when exploring the mine's dark and twisting passages, as it can be a really dangerous and extremely unpredictable environment. Don't go unless you know what you're doing. I would never visit. I don't like ghosts very much, and I definitely don't know anything about mines. It would just be a terrible combination. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the Naju House. The Naju House is a notorious attraction that has been shrouded in mystery and legends for decades. Located in the small town of Naju, this eerie house is said to be haunted by the spirits of the former owners who tragically died in a fire many years ago. Visitors who dare to enter the house are met with a chilling atmosphere and unsettling sounds that seem to come from all around them. Those who have entered the house claim to have experienced strange occurrences, such as doors closing by themselves and objects moving inexplicably. Some even report seeing apparitions and feeling an ominous presence watching them. This is one of those places that people explain leaves you with a chilling feeling that lasts long after you leave. I'm not gonna lie, that sounds like some sort of a vengeful presence that is probably better off just left alone.
Number 10. Poveglia Island. This place has centuries of horrible history. Like, this place is probably scarier than my bank statement. Poveglia Island is off the coast of Italy, and during the bubonic plague, it was where they would send sick people to die. If you don't know what the bubonic plague is, it wiped out 25 million people. It makes an E. coli outbreak seem like a bad hangover. They would do this to quarantine the sick, and the island would get so populated with people that eventually they would burn the dead bodies or those who were close to dead. It's believed that over 100,000 people have died on this island, so that's probably enough. But wait, there's more! In the early 20th century, they built an insane asylum on the island. I'm assuming they did this so that the ghosts from the plague could finally have some people to talk to. But this wasn't a place where people would go to get treated, it was more a place they would send them to exile them from the rest of humanity. There's even rumors that one of the head psychiatrists working on the island was performing all sorts of twisted experiments on his patients. That's until he killed himself by jumping off the bell tower. The island is now shut down and entry is forbidden. Many locals think that the island is cursed. I would have to say that killing hundreds of thousands of people and experimenting on innocent souls is a good way to get a curse going. Number 9. The Paris Catacombs. Why would anywhere in Paris be on this list? I would love to go to Paris. I would just go and eat bread and cheese all day and then start waging war against the mimes. But underneath Paris is the Paris Catacombs, which is house to about 6 million bodies. If you're wondering why, back in the 16th century, Paris had a problem with an overflow of corpses and needed somewhere to chuck them, so they started to put them in an abandoned quarry. This seems like when my room is too messy and instead of actually cleaning it up, I just throw everything in the closet. It took about 14 years to transfer all the bodies from cemeteries to their new homes under the city. Also, the catacombs were just one part of over 200 miles of passageways under the city. This really makes Paris seem much less romantic. If a bunch of dead bodies weren't enough, then I'm sure you'll be pleased to know that since the catacombs were built, many people have gone missing in there. Oh. Some people think it's just accidents, but others believe that there's something lurking in the shadows. Number 8. Hoabachu Forest. Let's go to a forest for a nice picnic and see a bunch of ghosts. Hoabaciu Forest is in Romania and is called the most haunted forest in the world. This place is massive, it covers over 250 hectares. Strange things are constantly happening in this place. People say they've seen ghosts, taken pictures with disembodied faces appearing in them, heard voices, giggling. People who enter the forest will also see physical signs of harm, like rashes, cuts, bruises, burns, nausea. The last bit kind of sounds just like allergies. I mean, you are in a forest. Many locals are too afraid to venture into the forest because of the legends. And if you don't believe in ghosts, then what about aliens? There have been several photos of UFOs flying over the forest. Some people have said they've seen floating balls of light appear out of nowhere. There's even an area in the forest where no vegetation will grow. That forms almost a perfect circle. There have been some tests done on this mysterious circle and it shows slightly higher levels of radiation. This could be because a UFO landed there and that's why nothing grows. Ghosts and aliens, pretty good reason to skip this vacation spot. Number 7. Eastern State Penitentiary, Pennsylvania. If just being a house for some of the most dangerous people who ever lived wasn't enough, I'm gonna give you a few more reasons why you would never want to visit this place. The old abandoned Eastern State Penitentiary in Pennsylvania used to be one of the most horrible prisons on earth. Anyone who was sent to this prison would be permanently kept in solitary confinement. You couldn't even make friends. You couldn't talk to people. You couldn't buy cigarettes that were snuck in inside someone's butt. It ruins all the fun of prison. They would go as far as making prisoners wear masks if they were transported from one place to another so no one could see or recognize their faces. As a punishment, some prisoners would be forced to sit in the mad chair, where you'd be strapped down and left there for days without food. Sometimes the straps were fastened so tight that limbs would have to be amputated after because there was no circulation. Since the closure of the prison, there have been 100 reports of ghostly encounters. One from a previous caretaker who said he was grabbed so tight he couldn't move from an unknown force, and then he saw distorted faces appear all over the walls. Number 6. Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Back in 1910, there was a tuberculosis epidemic that was sweeping through America. Hundreds of people were dying every day, so in Louisville, Kentucky, they thought about building a sanctuary where everyone could get better. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. Almost everyone who got sent up to the Waverly Hills Sanatorium died. Approximately 63,000 people died up there. When things were at their worst, they said that people were dying almost every hour. They had so many dead bodies that the hospital couldn't get them out fast enough and had to start keeping them in the cold storage unit in the kitchen. Yum! They would keep the ground beef next to the soon-to-be ground beef. Since this lovely getaway's closure, there have been many paranormal investigators that have gone to check out this ghost place, and this place is a ghost goldmine. Not only has there been countless sightings of ghosts, but a reoccurring beast known as the Creeper. It's said to be a man that runs on all fours with no face. Blah. Number 5. Area 51. This is probably the most famous one on the list. Area 51 is of course the top secret American military base in the middle of the desert out in Nevada. If I ever get on a plane to Nevada, it will be for Las Vegas. I'd rather lose my life savings playing blackjack than find out aliens are real and then get killed for it. The thing is, no one really knows what goes on in Area 51, but there have been many leaks. The biggest is that the United States uses the base to keep and test alien technology, and that they have living aliens there which they experiment on. There's even rumors that Area 51 has been compromised by the aliens that were being held there and now control it, shifting the direction of humankind with their newfound power. But like I said, I don't know, and I don't want to know. Next time I'm over in Vegas, the only place you'll find me is putting on 20 pounds at a buffet or singing along at the Britney Spears Vegas show. Number 4. Snake Island. I know there's some guy out there with a ponytail whose nipples probably got hard just at me saying Snake Island. He's probably picking out his favorite sword from his collection to go out on an expedition. Anyway, Snake Island is right off the coast of Sao Paulo, Brazil, and this place lives up to the reputation. There's approximately 1 snake for every square feet of island, and they aren't harmless garden snakes. Most of the snakes on the island are vipers, known for being venomous and having extremely large fangs. Snake Island used to be connected to the mainland and was just a regular old place, but then a flood disconnected it. A large amount of snakes were isolated there and they started thriving. This sounds like an abandoned script for the Anaconda movie with Ice Cube and Jennifer Lopez. Number 3. Seguin Island. Off the coast of Maine is Seguin Island. It's approximately 64 acres and almost completely abandoned. It has some visitors here and there, but there's almost no one who lives on the island. So if you ended up shipwrecked there, or for some reason there's a crazy killer on the island and he wanted to chop you up, then there'd be a good chance that no one would ever find you. But that's not even the creepiest part about this place. It's home to one of the oldest lighthouses in history. No one has lived in this building for quite some time, but it said when people come to visit, there have been many ghostly sightings. Some people say they can hear a little girl's laughter and piano playing. There have also been sightings of a ghostly old man that gets furious because all his furniture is gone. The audacity of some people. You die for 100 years and people just start moving all your stuff out. Number 2. Miyakojima Island. What did Pompeii teach us? Never live around volcanoes. They can blow at any moment and wipe out everyone. Well, it taught us that and what some people choose to do in their final moments. You know what they say, live by the sword, die by the sword. Well, the people of Miyakojima Island must have not got the memo because they all live at the base of a volcano. Every resident who lives on this island must own a gas mask because they're at constant risk of being covered in a gigantic cloud of deadly ash at any time. This is how the island got its nickname, Gas Mask Island. Also, if you make the risky choice to move to the base of an active volcano, you should get used to the sounds of sirens. There are sirens all over the island that will screech out to tell you it's time to put on your gas mask. Number 1. Island of the Dolls. Alright, we're gonna wrap up this list with a place that is dedicated to one of the creepiest things around. Dolls. The Island of the Dolls is located in Mexico, just south of Mexico City. The story behind this American Girl store meets House of a Thousand Corpses is there was a man who lived on this tiny island. One day he found a girl's dead body floating in the river, and not far away from it was a doll which he suspected belonged to the little girl. He then hung the girl's doll from a tree as a way to calm her spirit and continued to do so with every doll he could find. The twisted end to this story is that the man eventually was found dead in a spot not far from the girl's body was found.